Due to the odd angle that the third round of gastro acid came at him from, Raticate was forced to pull off an odd jump and rolling maneuver just to keep from getting hit. Raticate, you have to take the offensive or you're going to lose. Ash advised firmly, which had his gutsy Pokémon jumping back to his feet with pure will and grit before using quick attack to charge Carnivine. Teeth bared and beady eyes narrowed. However, that was apparently, from the smirk on Branson's face, just what he was waiting for. Carnivine. He let it trail off for a moment, just as Raticate came within a few feet of his Pokémon, before finishing. Use Vine Whip. The vines that appeared from the bottom part of Carnivine's plant-like form and surged forward at Raticate were almost too quick to see. Especially for the aforementioned rodent that was feeling the poison burning within him. In a whipping motion that was both laser-fast and completely unassuming, the vines that came from Carnivine lashed out and whipped Raticate's feet totally out from under him. Leaving the stunned Pokémon airborne for a second, before they quickly rose up and then smacked him down into the ground. Hard. Raticate grunted from the pain that rocked his body, and at that very same moment, the poison coursing through his system caused his body to lock up and freeze. All of it happened in the blink of a Venomoth's eye, and Branson used that same moment of misfortune to punish Raticate. Carnivine. He raised his hand. Use Leaf Tornado and Power Whip. The predatory grass type raised itself up as high as it could go and then chanted its name loudly. Just once, as a massive tornado of glowing, razor-sharp leaves formed into existence around it. While Raticate struggled to stand again, Carnivine sent the swirling funnel of green at him, leaving Ash's Pokémon in peril and unable to move. Ash too was helpless to assist his Pokémon, and as the tornado of leaves swept Raticate up inside of it and began spinning him around while slicing into his fur with the sharp leaves, the situation was only poised to get worse. From Carnivine's body unfurled more vines, but these looked both bigger, fatter and more powerful than the ones from earlier. They were also shown to be quicker too, as they practically flew into the tornado of deadly foliage like a serpent striking at its prey. Raticate had only been trapped in the funnel of all natural pain in agony for about 5 seconds, though it felt like about 5 minutes to him, before the new set of vines appeared inside of it as well and commenced to beating, smashing and whipping Raticate around like a pinball. Carnivine kept itself firmly rooted to the ground so it wasn't pulled into the funnel either by its vines, but it didn't have to fight long because, in approximately 10 more seconds, Raticate went flying out of the top of it and soared high through the air. As if he had suddenly grown wings. Ash watched his Pokémon slam into the ground only a few feet away from his side of the ring, and he wasn't surprised, upon seeing Raticate more clearly, that he had finally been defeated. He had simply taken all the abuse he could handle and, on top of the poison, his body finally gave in. Instead of getting upset, Ash walked out and bent down to scoop his unconscious Pokémon into his arms. Then, looking back, he asked, "Hey Brock, you got some antidote in your bag? I have some, but I need to focus on the battle, would you mind?" Brock quickly nodded and then ran out to take Raticate gently from Ash's arms before hurrying back over to Misty and Giselle, where he knelt down and slipped his pack off his shoulders. Ash watched his 3 friends, Misty and Giselle, helping Brock by holding Raticate while he grabbed a yellow bottle of antidote from his bag, prepared to administer the poison antidote to his unconscious Pokémon. So that at least he didn't have to deal with that particular affliction before they managed to visit the Pokémon Center. After he was assured that Raticate was in good hands, Ash turned around again and smiled. "Well Branson, this has been fun, and now we're both down to our last Pokémon." The other boy gave an actual smile in return. "Yes, and I should thank you, Ash. I haven't felt excitement from battling like this in a long time." The other, younger boy, nodded before looking down at V. "I think we could use Flareon for this gig, what do you say, V?" The unique and very powerful little fox-like Pokémon chirped his reply excitedly and then ran out to take his position as Ash's final Pokémon. "Pikachu Pie." Pikachu cheered his partner in all things anti-Pokeball on while V looked back and flicked his ears in friendly response. Then, facing forward again, the little Pokémon called out his name as he began to glow with the white fire of evolution. V. Branson was left with wide, disbelieving eyes as he watched the small Pokémon evolve right in front of him before, Soon enough, the light died down and a fierce, powerful-looking Flareon was standing in V's place. Flary! Came the howl from the newly evolved Pokémon as V scraped his paw against the ground. That's impossible. Branson pointed in disbelief. I didn't see any kind of a firestone being used. Ash merely smirked and gave a dismissive reply. Sorry Branson, but my Eevee is unique and we're gonna prove it. The white-haired teen heffed and put a hand into his pocket. We'll see about that. Carnivine used toxic. Spitting up a dark, extremely poisonous mass of viscous goop from its mouth that took next to no time to create, Branson's final Pokémon unleashed one of the most effective, dangerous poison-type moves known to Pokémon battling. V, however, proved his speed, especially in one of his evolved forms, was no laughing matter. Utilizing a quick attack that was faster than Raticate's, V disappeared out of harm's way where Toxic fell and then reappeared on the other side of the ring. Though now he was running towards Carnivine using the same move to enhance his speed. Put on edge by the display of speed from a type superior Pokémon, Branson gave another command, this one more hurried. Carnivine used Sweet Scent. Inside, he was hoping that maybe, just maybe V would have been a girl to his male Pokémon, but right as Carnivine released the pleasantly smelling pink powder into the air, V and Ash were one step ahead as the boy called out, V use Fire Spin. Flare. The genetically modified Pokémon cried as he expelled a hot, rotating burst of flames from his mouth, which met the pinkish spores of Sweet Scent in the air and quickly neutralized and burnt them away. Without breaking stride, V continued on his way with Carnivine set firmly in his sights. Branson, becoming nervous, commanded his Pokémon to use Vine Whip again, hoping that such a ploy might work as it did on Raticate. Unfortunately for both he and Carnivine, V was far too agile and lithe on his feet to fall for something so elementary, and as the encroaching vines came his way, the multi-type Pokémon was able to easily dodge, swerve, duck and jump over each vine. At one point, Carnivine thought it would fake V out and swung the left vine at him while the right one made a forward jabbing motion. V, seeing the two attacks coming from two different angles, stopped in his tracks and then unleashed a small but hot ember attack from his mouth. Carnivine was not expecting this, and as its vines sailed straight into the flame, the grass type cried aloud in pain while V jumped straight through the flames, on top of the now singed vines, and used quick attack to run across them like tightropes. Outmaneuvered and unable to move as dexterously as V, Carnivine ended up taking a head-on body slam as Ash's Pokémon threw himself full-on into the weaker-typed Pokémon. Carnivine fell back and tumbled onto the ground and then looked up just as V lunged at him again, intent on doing the same thing. This time, both Carnivine and Branson felt the desperation of the moment, but Trainer was quicker than Pokémon and yelled, Carnivine use Stockpile. Ash, as well as his three friends' eyes all widened upon hearing that, but it was too late for V, whom was already airborne. His own eyes widening in surprise, V ended up falling straight into his opponent's hugely gaping maw as Carnivine practically unhinged its mouth completely in order to make itself wide enough to catch V. As soon as the currently fire-typed Pokémon landed inside of Carnivine's mouth, the living plant snapped its jaws tightly closed, locking V inside with no way out. Smirking at the change of fortune, Branson commanded. Now use Swallow and Ring Out in conjunction. With V struggling to get free inside of Carnivine's mouth, the grass-type Sinnoh Pokémon bore down on its opponent like it was trying to crush V with nothing but pure jaw strength. However, instead of crushing him, Carnivine commenced to chomping and down, like it was chewing on V, all while its body began glowing a faint green with sparkles emitting from it. Not understanding what she was seeing, Misty blinked, her brow creased in worry. What's happening to V? Brock furrowed his own brow as well. I think Carnivine is using Ring Out, which is a move that squeezes the energy and health out of a Pokémon, and Swallow, which absorbs energy, to take out V from inside of its mouth. For every ounce of energy Ring Out robs from him, Carnivine uses Swallow to absorb that energy for itself. Ash, at first, seemed to be greatly concerned for his Pokémon's sake as Carnivine continued to both drain and steal V's energy. But, eventually, common sense struck home like a bell on a clock tower and he, for the moment, felt like a royal idiot. Duh, of course. He smacked his forehead. V. If you can hear me, use fire spin as hot as you possibly can. Fortunately for Ash, unfortunately for Branson and Carnivine, and a general point of interest for everyone else not involved in the battle, V not only heard him but was able to do more than Ash asked. Most people would not know unless they had studied a Flareon's internal anatomy, but that particular species of Pokémon had a fire sac within them, much like most all other fire-type Pokémon, of which gave them the ability to make fire. Now, for a Flareon, that temperature within the fire sac was able to reach incredibly hot temperatures. A whopping 3000 degrees in fact, at its hottest. This, combined with the fact that V did indeed hear his trainer, spelled nothing short of impending doom and disaster for their opponent. From inside the darkness of Carnivine's mouth, V, whom was beginning to sweat in exertion from having his energy stolen from him, closed his eyes and began focusing on internally heating his fire sac up as hot as he could get it. To add fuel to the proverbial fire, he also focused on his current situation and allowed his irritation and frustration at it cause him to become angry, which heated his fire sac even more. Finally, after several long moments in which everyone, even Branson, who thought it impossible for Flareon to use an attack in such a state, was in a state of anxiousness, a light began glowing out from under the edges of Carnivine's mouth. Gradually, the light grew stronger and stronger, like there was a furnace smoldering inside of the grass type, until suddenly and out of nowhere, Carnivine's eyes widened and it began feeling a terribly uncomfortable sensation. Like a furnace really was inside of it and rapidly heating up. The feeling grew until it became actual pain for the fire-hating Pokémon. That pain increased exponentially the hotter it became inside of Carnivine's body until, finally, it was forced to open its mouth. Well, forced was more the term. Just as Carnivine went to open up, a powerful torrent of flames went jetting out of its mouth like the pure grass type had suddenly learned a fire-type move against all odds. For Carnivine though, it was the farthest thing from the truth. In many ways, it was like getting the entire inside of one's mouth scorched and burnt beyond belief. From the spiraling swirl of flames that came erupting out of Carnivine's mouth, V himself soon emerged as well, flying out of his opponent's burning maw like a bright, glowing shooting star. Then, as V flipped in the air and landed on all fours upon the ground, facing Carnivine, whose mouth was still on fire, literally, he growled and opened his mouth again. Due to all the extreme building of heat that V did inside of himself while he was trapped inside of Carnivine, his eyes were now practically glowing with flame and under his belly, the bright orange light of extreme heat was visibly burning inside of him for all to see. As his mouth opened and another spiraling ball of red-hot flames built within it, V widened his stance and then lifted himself up on his hind legs before dropping to the ground and releasing the attack he had been building. Fla Airy. As he cried his name, a massive eruption of fire, far bigger than either ember or fire spin put together, emerged and blazed its way towards Carnivine like a wall of red and orange living heat. Ash knew, right at that very moment, that because of all of V's heat building inside of Carnivine's mouth, the massive increase in temperature within his flame sac had allowed him to unlock Flamethrower. A move Ash also knew was one that, unless specially taught, a Flareon couldn't normally learn on its own. Carnivine, knowing there was no way to avoid the blast of fire coming for it, merely lifted up the leafy appendages on either side of its body that could be considered arms, and tried to shield itself. Soon, Branson watched his Pokémon become consumed in the light of the bright flames and actually had to avert his gaze, lest his eyes were hurt by such powerful light. Even the heat coming off of the attack nearly burned the arm that he had extended out to cover his face. The fire eventually died down and faded away, returning the inside of the warehouse to its slightly gloomy, damp condition while silence began to reign and all noise ceased. V, whom was panting from where he stood, not moving, looked straight ahead where he saw his opponent, Carnivine, laying flat on its back upon the battlefield. Some smoke was still rising off of its unmoving body and there were blackened singe marks all over it. It was quite clear Carnivine was beaten. Knowing they had reached the end of their match, Ash let out the breath he had been holding and then ran out to V with Pikachu hot on his heels. V. He slid next to his Pokémon and wrapped his arms around his still warm partner's furry body. You did it. You won the match for us. While he jumped fully into Ash's arms to be embraced, V changed back into an Eevee in the process and then snuggled into his trainer's chest while the boy held him tightly and praised him continuously. Branson, smiling sadly and returning his defeated Pokémon, put his hands into his deep pants pockets and then slowly slumped his way, lazily, up to his victorious challenger. The excitement of the battle having quickly passed for him and allowing the young man to once more return to a disenchanted state. Ash. He began as he came to stand before the black-haired boy. The trainer in question finished praising V and lifted the small Pokémon up onto his shoulder while smiling at the gym leader. That was a fantastic gym match, Branson. You pushed us hard and I enjoyed every minute of it. His friends walked up to join him while the white-haired teen rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I got into gym leading because I figured, if I set up shop around here, who'd really find me that often? But, you did and you beat me fair and square, so I guess I should probably take this as a sign to train a little more than I do now. Maybe. Possibly. He shrugged his shoulders. At least I'll think about it. Ash and the other three with him just smiled in amusement at the young man's perpetual laziness before, in curiosity, Brock asked. Hey Branson, I just thought about it. When I read up on your gym in the guidebook, it never really explained what type you specialized in, and now after seeing the Pokémon you used to battle with, I'm even more curious. The eternally sleepy-looking teenager looked at his gym-leading peer and shrugged again. Meh, it was too much of a hassle for me to get my gym certified in a specific type because that would have called for me to become a type-specific trainer and, just the thought exhausted me. So. He gestured around at his gym. I renovated this old shipping warehouse into a gym, got my license and decided to just be non-specific in type. At least when it comes to Pokémon. You probably notice I heavily favor one type of moves more than any other. Ash nodded. Yeah, it's poison type, isn't it? You used Pokémon that had the ability to use those types of moves. Right-o. The short white-haired boy clicked a finger at Ash. I don't train type-specific Pokémon, but I do prefer poison-type moves over any other. A little shyly, he admitted with a sheepish head scratch. I do kind of admire Koga, the Fuchsia City gym leader. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers and then sighed. That's right, I almost forgot, here Ash. He then pulled out a small badge case from one of his pockets and opened it up for everyone to see. For defeating the Gringy City Pokémon Gym, I hereby. Branson stopped and then just sighed again. Look, I'm sure you've done this before, so here, just, take this. It's called the Poison Badge. Ash reached out and took the shiny new badge in hand, and as he did, he examined it closely. His new badge was oval-shaped and was colored a dark gray for the most part. There was a black line that went down the center of the badge and then separated around a smaller circle in the center of it, which was colored to be a more dark purple. He made a point to show the badge to Pikachu, V and his friends before looking at Branson again and nodding. Thank you, Branson, maybe we can battle again sometime. The white-haired boy stuffed both hands in his pockets and smirked. Yeah, but maybe just not around here. I wouldn't blame you for never coming back to this city. It's a total drag of a place and the atmosphere is just one big gray cloud of nothing. I like it because it's quiet but, not really much of a tourist town. Yeah, about that, Misty spoke up as she raised her hand. Brock was telling us on the way here that this place used to be a really vibrant and lively town, at least from what the guidebook said about it. What happened to it? Branson dipped his shoulders and sighed again. Honestly. Industry happened. Arceus knows we need it and can't live without it, and it's a little known secret, but this is a power town, which means our main export and entire local economy revolves around generating electricity. We help power half the Kanto eastern seaboard with what we generate here, believe it or not. The lazy and uninterested young man looked up at one of the windows of the warehouse that served as his gym. When the electric company moved in here a few years ago and started to really churn out power by using all the water that comes in from the ocean around the town, our economy spiked but pollution really began picking up. This used to be a fishing hub, but once the electric company came, all that changed. Now fishing is just a minor business around here. Once again, he sighed sadly. Pokémon pretty much left the area, save for a population of water types that keeps the fishing industry alive, and most of the people that didn't work for the power plant or owned fishing boats just cut their losses and left. We still have quite a few people here, but not as many as we did, and most of them just stay inside if they can, since it always stays so cold and foggy around here. He then rubbed the back of his head. I don't know much more than that though. I only moved here myself about 5 years ago. Misty and the others nodded to his explanation, but Ash soon spoke up as he turned to face his friends. I guess we can just go find the Pokémon Center then and stay the night until morning. My Pokémon can get all rested up in the meantime and we can set out early tomorrow. Branson stepped forward at that moment. I can give you directions of how to get to the center if you'd like. I would go with you, but. He looked up and sighed in frustration. It's been so long now that I've had a challenger. I'm gonna have to rack my brain to remember how to register your victory in my computer for the league's record log. Record log? Ash asked as he blinked in confusion. Yeah, a record log. Brock began explaining for his friend. Every time a gym leader loses, they have to record that loss for the Pokémon League, that way your badge and victory are considered legitimate. We all have to do it. I did yours back when you beat me for the Boulder badge before I left to come traveling with you, Ash. The boy nodded in understanding and then looked back at Branson. That's okay, we understand. Just point us in the right direction and we'll be out of your hair, he finished with a joking smile. The other trainer actually cracked a small smile at the jest and then showed Ash and his friends outside before pointing them in the direction of the Pokémon Center. Afterwards, they all said their goodbyes and then Ash and Troop set off for their next destination. They only ended up walking for about 10 minutes though, and had just left the docks behind and entered into the city proper when, suddenly, they heard a loud yell. Help! Someone please! Help me! Wait, did you guys hear that? Ash stopped mid-step and looked down in the direction of the city he heard the yell come from. Misty and the other two stopped as well and listened closely before. Sure enough, they heard another cry for help. I hear it. Giselle stepped forward and pointed down a far street that was on the other side of the road. That way. Without thinking, Ash narrowed his eyes and took off. Come on. Brock and the only two female members of the group quickly took off after their friend without waiting to argue and followed him as he charged down the street and closer to the source of the distress. Eventually, they came out into a large open square in the city where a large building that looked like it was some kind of a government office was situated. In front of the steps that lead up to the entrance of the building, just off to the side, was a slightly pudgy man wearing a fancy black suit with a balding head, save for 2 strips of brown hair on the side. The man also had a bushy brown mustache. The portly fellow was cowering down near the bottom steps, and around him was a whole cluster of what the 4 traveling friends immediately recognized to be Grimer. And swarming ones at that. Look. Misty pointed. That man is being attacked by those Grimer. Ash ran forward a few steps and called over his shoulder. Come on, let's help him. At those words, Pikachu and V both jumped down off his shoulders, ready to fight, while Misty, Brock and Giselle all joined in and pulled out their chosen Pokeballs to help. Brock selected Graveler, Giselle picked Marowak and Misty chose her Starmie. Then, in haste, Ash looked down at his Eevee. V, I want you to turn into Vaporeon and use Water Pulse. The small little Pokemon nodded and then jumped forward before his whole body began to glow and he quickly evolved. Vaporeon! He cried out seconds later as he transformed into his water-type counterpart. Then, opening his mouth, he let loose a strong blast of water from his mouth in the form of a sphere which struck the first Grimer straight in the back and caused the entire group to turn and look their way. Seeing that they had the Grimer's attention and temporarily distracted them from the man, Ash and his friends went into full-on battle mode as their Pokémon jumped onto the front line. Marowak used Bonemerang. Giselle yelled and gestured with a hand wave while Brock raised his fist. And you use Rock Throw Graveler. Misty, meanwhile, flung both arms out. Starmie used Water Gun and Swift. Ash looked down at Pikachu and Vaporeon as well. You two get in there and help too. Working in tandem, the whole troop of well-trained Pokémon fully engaged the large group of Grimer as they unleashed their attacks at almost the same time and dealt a hard first strike. The Grimer, untrained and skittish in battle, were woefully unprepared to deal with the surprise onslaught that came their way, and because of that, ended up being slightly scattered by the combination of attacks. Vaporeon provided cover fire for Pikachu with moves like Water Pulse and Aurora Beam, while the fast and vicious little electric type jumped right into the midst of the Grimer and began engaging all of them with moves like Iron Tail and Mega Punch. Meanwhile, the stragglers outside of Pikachu's vicinity, all the other Pokémon, began attacking. Graveler used moves like Rock Throw and Rollout to fight against the Grimer, while Marowak used a combination of Bone Club and Bonemerang to do his part. Starmie, on the other hand, made use of Bubble Beam and Swift from a distance, much like Vaporeon. After only a very short time of engaging the Grimer, the group's Pokémon had them on the ropes and just about to flee. Seeing the time for a final victory, Ash called Vaporeon back to his side and then smirked. Pikachu, use Charge and then Thunderbolt. And make it a big one. He finished with a flourish of his hand. The love of battle was like an electrical spark in the rodent Pokémon's eyes as Pikachu jumped away from all of the Grimer and then performed several little hops to get a safe enough distance away. Once he was in position, Pikachu got down onto all fours and began to build up electricity in his body, which was signified by his cheeks crackling with numerous sparks of electrical energy, while his small little body itself practically began glowing from the power intake. Giselle and the others' Pokémon quickly retreated away from Pikachu's range, and Ash himself made sure to call out to the still cowering man. Hey! Get away from there! Take cover, quick! The more rotund gentleman heard Ash and opened his eyes at that moment to see what was happening. Noticing the danger he was in, the man got up and clumsily stumbled away until he was hiding behind a pillar near the steps. Finally, just in time, Pikachu raised up and cried out his name in a loud chant as a massive thunderbolt erupted from his body and surged towards the Grimer, whom by now all seemed panicked. When the bolt of pure electrical force finally made contact, it illuminated the whole city square in blinding yellow light and set off an electrical charge that sent static throughout the whole area. Enough to put everyone's hair on end. When the bolt of thunder died down and disappeared seconds later, all the Grimer were burnt and smoking as they just looked at the now smirking Pikachu, blinked a time or two, and then took off, all in one direction down the opposite street. As fast as their slimy and now sparking bodies could take them. As Ash and company cheered their Pokémon and celebrated what could very well be considered a victory, Pikachu and the others ran back to their trainers. The former jumped up into Ash's arms while V returned to his normal state, but before anything could go any farther, the pudgy man hiding behind one of the stairway pillars stepped out. Oh my goodness. Thank you, young Pokémon trainers, you saved my life. He hurried up to them and quickly shook all four young travelers' hands. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. He then stepped away from the somewhat off-balance trainers and held his arms out. I felt for sure those Grimer were going to do me in, but then all of you showed up and chased them off. I've never seen such skill. He gestured at himself. My name is Harold Bitterman and I am the mayor of this town. He bowed his head low. Thank you so very much for saving my life, all of you. Ash blinked a time or two as he raised a slightly crooked finger. You're welcome, no big deal. So you're the mayor? Brock asked interestedly. The portly man nodded. Indeed. I've been mayor of this town for going on, I'd say, around 10 years now. His face dropped in shock at that moment. Oh my, this is terrible. I don't even know your names. May I ask who the brave young children are that saved my life? I'm Giselle. The brunette laid her palm on her chest. I was a former student at Pokémon Tech. Misty tilted her head and smiled. My name's Misty, I was the former Cerulean Pokémon gym leader. And I'm Brock. The older teen put his hands on his hips. I used to be a gym leader too, of Pewter City. Ash was last as he introduced his Pokémon. Well, first, the ones who really saved you for my part were these two. This is V, he gestured down at the little genetic wonder, whom yipped cutely at the mayor. And this is my buddy Pikachu, he looked lastly up at the electric type on his shoulder, who held out a peace sign to Mr. Bitterman. And I'm Ash. He spoke lastly of himself. I'm from Pallet Town and I'm training to enter the Indigo Conference this coming year. The mayor rubbed his hands together and nodded. So a traveling trainer on his way to a big tournament, a young lady fresh out of a prestigious Pokémon school and two former gym leaders, well now it makes sense. No wonder you were able to drive those Grimer away. If you don't mind me asking, sir, Misty spoke again. Why were those Grimer trying to attack you in the first place? The mayor of Gringy City frowned and held up a finger, as if he was about to tell some grand story. Well, I had just gotten back from a budget meeting with the financial board at our Chamber of Commerce when those Grimer just came out of nowhere and attacked me, just as I was getting ready to walk up the steps. They were relentless. Giselle blinked. Well, yes, but why did they attack you though? Do you know if there was a reason? Brock nodded. Yep, Pokémon don't normally just attack people unless there's a reason for it or unless they're just from a naturally aggressive species. The mayor sighed sadly and shook his head. Unfortunately, such incidents have been becoming the routine norm for our town these past few months. We have no idea why, but the Grimer just suddenly showed up one day and began terrorizing the town. We've tried getting rid of them, but so far, nothing has worked. He then looked up again and held out his hand. We recently hired 3 supposed experts who are well versed in the removal of Grimer from troubled areas, but so far, nothing has changed. We haven't even heard from them since they were hired this last week. Ash and his friends shared a look with each other. Even though none of them said it, the cause for why the Grimer had moved in seemed rather clear. Grimer were Pokémon that loved filth, garbage and pollution, and from what they had seen so far, the whole city was like a disgusting paradise of just such an atmosphere. The mayor's eyes soon settled on V, however, and upon seeing the signs of what looked to be some battle wear on the Pokémon's pelt, he asked in curiosity. Is that Eevee quite alright? It looks a little disheveled. Ash looked down at his Pokémon and then shook his head. Yeah, we just got done challenging the Pokémon gym here. We were actually on the way to the Pokémon Center when we heard you call for help. Is that so? The rotund man pulled at his suit coat and gave a beaming smile. Well, if you would permit me, then I can take all 4 of you to the Pokémon Center. It is the least I can do for you, saving my life. That'd be great, thanks. Ash answered with his friends nodding in agreement. And so, after returning their Pokémon, the 4 young friends followed the mayor as he led them through the dingy, dark streets of the city and to the Pokémon Center. All the while, they were completely unaware that they were being followed by a mysterious levitating stalker. One that hid in the darkness given off by the eternally gloomy surroundings of the dirty city. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Upon arriving a short time later, they were all greeted by the sight of a massive building built into 3 diamond-like shapes. The stone is gray and dull as the rest of the city, with the emblem for the Pokémon Center emblazoned at the very top. Ah, here we are. The mayor made a grand gesture. Follow me if you will. He then led them through the double slide doors of the center, and after walking inside, the wide in circumference politician guided the kids up to the front desk. After ringing the bell upon the counter's surface and waiting for several moments, Nurse Joy herself appeared from the back room, yawning and covering her mouth with a hand. Seeing the mayor standing at the counter, Joy just blinked a few times and then sighed, her immediate demeanor seeming very unlike most of her other family members. Mr. Mayor, what is it? I'm tired and was just, she yawned, taking a nap in the back room. Why did you come here of all places? You don't have any Pokémon. The mayor smiled jovially at the bored and disenchanted-looking Joy, her general aura being so off that even Brock didn't go crazy over her, before gesturing back at the ones who were with him. I just brought my 4 new young friends to you, Joy. They were kind enough to save my life from a horde of Grimer at the town hall, and as a kindness, I offered to bring them here. They were on the way before coming to my rescue besides the fact. He then nodded to Ash specifically. This gentleman here just finished battling against young Branson, and I do believe his Pokémon in particular could most likely use a nice, long recovery after what I am sure was a most arduous match. Finally settling her gaze on the 4 newcomers in question, Joy merely sighed again. Oh, very well. She then clapped her hands as a Chansey pushing the Pokémon cart soon came bounding in through an open hall archway behind the counter and into the lobby. Just put your Pokeballs on the cart and I'll get to them as soon as I can, the pink-haired nurse advised dismissively. This, of course, got some strange looks exchanged between Ash and his friends. Ah. Ash began as he raised his finger. Excuse me, nurse, but you wouldn't happen to be the oddball of your family, would you? Because no offense, but you're nothing like the other nurse joys we've met. The joy in question blinked at him a time or two before actually giggling and then waving her hand. Oh no, no, not at all. It's all the rest of my sisters that are the oddballs. The four Pokémon trainers' face faulted at her reply, but before they could move to place their Pokeballs on the cart, the lights in the center suddenly went out. Hey, what happened? Misty got up and looked around while Ash frowned. Looks like the power went out. The thin and lithe young woman looked at her friend with thin eyes as she replied sarcastically, oh really? I wouldn't have guessed that. Nurse Joy sighed in frustration and immediately began searching around under her counter. This is just great. Another rolling blackout. Another one. Giselle turned to the nurse as Joy pulled out a lantern and sat it on the counter, lighting it soon after so at least the lobby was illuminated in some light. Yes, alas. The mayor gave his own tired-sounding sigh. Ever since those Grimer moved in, the town has been experiencing blackouts. But how? Brock asked the obvious question and Joy answered. The Grimer are drawn to the power plant for some reason. Possibly the energy pollution, and they try to get in through the seaway access panels that filters water into the plant itself. The only problem is that when they do it, they always end up clogging the main waterway and it stops the flow of the water. The power plant needs the water to function properly, and if it doesn't get it. The mayor looked around. This happens. The whole plant shuts down and cuts power to the entire town. The worst part is though, Joy interjected, this time her face actually coming to show genuine concern and worry. I have Pokémon here at the center and with the power out, I can't treat them properly. Even worse, some are in critical care in their healing incubators, and unless we get the power back on soon, this could kill them. Ash and his friends all turned to face her with expressions of shock and serious concern on their faces. But what about a backup generator? Misty demanded. You have to have one of those here somewhere. Joy shook her head. We had to stop using them. Every time the power went out before and we used the backup generators, Grimer would come and try to attack them. We don't know why, but we can't use them because of that. Ash was immediate in his train of thought. Then the answer is obvious. We're gonna go to that power plant and see what's wrong. Brock and the others nodded vigorously to his proposal, which caused Joy and the mayor to look surprised. Really? She asked in astonishment. You would do that? Misty nodded. Of course. We can't just let Pokémon lay around and die. The mayor practically jumped for joy. Well, this is a fortunate turn of luck. Arceus really has sent you kids here for us, bless you all. If you children could really go and get our power back on, then we would be most in your debt. How do we get there? Brock asked, his squinty eyes narrowed seriously. It would be hard to give you directions from here since the city is so big, Joy answered. And it would waste time giving you directions, so just go to the police station instead. Officer Jenny can point you to the power plant far easier than I can since it's very close to her station. That's right. The mayor nodded. Just go from this center and head right back down the street you came from to get here. When you reach the first right in the road, take it and you'll see the police station. Ash nodded. Right. He then looked to his friends. Hurry guys, let's go. The four of them ran out of the Pokémon Center then, with V and Pikachu taking to Ash's shoulders so they could keep up. As they left, the mayor and Joy both called after them. Good luck. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX telescope he had been peeping through and looked back at his two companions. Dressed in heavy blue containment suits with diving helmets strapped to their heads, Jesse and James turned from where they were standing and looked back at the talking Pokémon. "We don't have time to go peeking and sightseeing, Meowth," Jessie snapped as she flung her arm to the side, very nearly hitting James and knocking him into the filthy brown water that was flowing through the sewer tunnel they were standing in. "Hey, watch it, Jesse," the blue-haired man whined as he waved his arms around like a bird to keep from falling in. "No, really, you guys need to see this," Meowth insisted as he turned and put his face back against the telescope again. The length of the telescope was stuck up through one of the grates of the sewer ceiling and had its head peeking up through some bushes above. All that was visible from the lens of the object was the big, slitted eye of Meowth as he watched Ash and his friends run down the street a short distance away. "Ya won't believe it, but da twerps are here," Meowth announced excitedly. "And they look like they're in a hurry." James and Jesse both looked at each other and grinned. "We might be able to take advantage of this sudden turn of good fortune," Jesse said with a cackle. "And get a whole lot more than a few measly credits just from mucking around the mud like this," James agreed enthusiastically. "If we play our cards right," Jessie began as she raised her finger, "we might be able to get Pikachu too." "Yeah, but first things first," Meowth interrupted as he turned in the little hovering red saucer he was standing in. "We got a job ta do, and if we play our cards right, we might be able ta get da twerps and all them Grimer at one time." "Huh." The humans of the team responded together. "What do you mean, Meowth?" Jesse asked with a blink. "Well, let's think about it a minute." The cat-like Pokémon smugly closed his eyes and raised a clawed finger. "We're going to catch all those Grimer we were hired to take care of, right? We've already narrowed their location down to da power plant here in the city, and if we know da twerps, where there's something going on with Pokémon, they're always there." Ah. James's eyes shone as he brought his hands up to his face into fists. "So you think we might run into them at the power plant?" "Good thinking, Meowth." He nodded a few times before smirking. "That's right. But first," he patted the hovering red saucer he was in, "we gotta get used to down through that sewer pipe and into da power plant before we do anything else. Now jump in." "Arg, why don't you get into the filthy water and do it instead, Meowth?" Jesse fumed. "Yeah, why do we have to?" James complained plaintively. "Because." Meowth raised a finger again. "I have to stay up here so I can man the controls for ya oxygen supply. Ya wanna breath, don't ya? And besides, I don't got a suit like dat in my size. Now in ya go." Casually pressing a button on the saucer's control panel, then, just as Jesse and James were about to jump him, Meowth sent a charge of electricity through the hoses attached to their air helmets and lit up the two of them like Christmas trees. Jesse and James convulsed and screamed as they were shocked, while Meowth simply stood in place with his paws behind his back and a still smug look on his face. "I thought you'd see it my way," he taunted flippantly a short time later as his two teammates were slowly lowered into the sludgy water in the sewer runoff. "Now remember dat it's da first tunnel to ya right once ya get to da end of this runoff. And hurry up, cause ya only got so much oxygen in these tanks up here." He reached out and patted the two large oxygen tanks next to his hovering saucer, which were connected to an automatic pump that fed the fresh air through the hoses. "And it'd be a shame if I had to find new teammates just cause ya got turned around and suffocated down there. We won't forget this, Meowth." Jesse growled as their helmets were lowered under the murky water. For his part though, Meowth simply kept his smug composure and took no small matter of pleasure at the thought of his two comrades now swimming their way through the sludge, muck and filthy sewer water. "Well," he spoke to himself with a smile slowly stretching across his whiskered cheeks. "Nobody ever said those two weren't full of crap." His humor was soon halted though after several minutes when the oxygen machine pump suddenly died down and finally halted altogether, his saucer's control panel doing the same soon thereafter. Looking around the sewer and not realizing that the power topside had been cut, he blinked. "Somehow we just lost power. And if we lost power, then it means Jesse and James won't be able to get no fresh air down there. Sweet dropping." He raised a paw to his lips. "Ooh, they won't like that." And sure enough, it was only a short time later that, while they swam down the long sewer tunnel to their intended destination, James commented, "You know, this actually isn't working out too bad. I suppose Meowth really did know what he was doing." Jesse smirked as their shoulder-mounted lights swiveled back and forth to help illuminate the horrible visibility of the murky water. "I guess sometimes even idiot furballs get lucky with a good idea or two." That sentiment didn't last long though, since the loss of fresh, clean oxygen quickly caught up to them and made them realize it, since the horrendous stink of the water around them began filling their helmets. "Gah." Jessie's cheeks puffed out and she reached her hands up to her helmet. "That smell is horrible. Agah." James too hacked beside of her, their forward momentum halted in the blink of an eye as they began sinking like stones. Can't. Breath. James coughed as his eyes bugged out. Curse. You. Meowth. Jesse wheezed just as the hoses they were connected to went taut and then began yanking the two of them back through the water. A short while later, Jesse and James were laying sprawled out on the walkway beside the flowing sewer water, their helmets cast off to the side while they took huge, gasping breaths of precious air. No matter how foul it still smelled down in the sewer. Well, looks like we won't be getting in that way. Meowth commented casually as he hovered before them on his saucer. The city lost power, which means ya suits won't work anymore and a little generator I used can only operate without live current for a few minutes. Which is probably why it took longer for us to notice the blackout. You, little rat. Jesse heaved. We almost died because of you. You almost killed us. James panted petulantly. But if it wasn't for me retracting your hoses and pulling ya back, you'd both be collecting sludge of your own down there. But, he crosses his arms. I think I got another way we can at least get Pikachu and forget Da Grimer. He then opened his eyes and saw both Jesse and James now passed out on the dirty sewer floor, leaving him to sigh and shrug his shoulders. So hard to find good help these days. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Look. Up ahead. Brock pointed to a small police station just a short ways up the street ahead of them. A police station. They can probably point us right to the power station. Ash and his friends hurried up to the station in question and as soon as they arrived in front of it, he knocked on the glass door. Within seconds, a visibly hurried-looking officer Jenny opened the door and stepped outside with a phone stuck to her ear. Luckily, the situation was important enough that Brock remained on good behavior. Hey wait a minute sir, I'm sorry, just give me a minute. She then focused on the four kids in front of her after putting her caller on hold. What do you kids want? Is there something else the matter now? The tone of her voice conveyed that Jenny had apparently been dealing with quite a bit of frustration and Ash only confirmed her suspicions. Yes officer, I'm sorry but we're on a mission given to us by the mayor to go to the power plant and try to get the power in the city back on. Yes ma'am, Giselle nodded. We're Pokémon trainers. The female officer's eyes widened. Pokémon trainers. Well she turned her face and practically yelled into the phone. I said give me a minute please. She lowered the phone from her ear and then looked over all four trainers while holding it to her chest. So you're looking for the power plant. She turned and pointed to a factory a short distance ahead with smokestacks rising up into the sky. That's it right there. She then looked at them again. Listen, I don't know what led to the mayor asking you for to do this and normally I wouldn't allow it without me being along in case of danger but, I'm so swamped from this power outage that I have no choice. She saluted to the kids. Please go and do what you can to help get our city's power back. I am almost willing to guarantee that this has something to do with the Grimer again, please do what you can and be careful. They all nodded. Will do officer, thank you. Ash responded before they took off down the road once again. Jenny watched them off from the doorway of the station and blinked worriedly. Good luck you kids. The incessant chattering on the other end of the line had her growling and putting the phone back to her ear though. I said I'd be right back. Was all that was heard from her before she stormed back inside and shut the door. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Man, this place is totally empty. Misty finished for Ash as she and her three friends with her stepped in through the doors of the power station and were greeted with total and complete darkness. There was an eerie silence. A chill in the air of the deserted hallway stretching before them that only came from being in a giant building that was supposed to be filled with people, only for it to not. A few seconds later, Brock was turning a flashlight on he had pulled from his backpack and panned the light back and forth across the hallway. This place really is deserted. Giselle walked past him and looked around before commenting. I don't see anything that looks like there were any struggles in here, so maybe most of the workers are just home for the night. Ash stepped forward and put his hands on his hips. I don't know but we have to try and either find some people that work here or find the Grimer instead that caused the power outage and chase them off. Brock shone his light at his friend and suggested with a shrug. You could always try catching them once we find the Grimer. Giselle stuck her tongue out a little in disgust, along with Misty, at the thought of catching the infamously smelly, dirty Pokémon, but Ash scratched the nape of his neck and scrunched his face a tad. Honestly, I'm really not a fan of catching multiple Pokémon of the same type. He shrugged, looking up at Pikachu and then to V on his other shoulder while smiling. I just think it makes it to where it's hard to have a really close bond with your Pokémon when you've got more than one of the same species. That and he grinned a little goofily. It's hard to tell them apart too. Hey, look at this. Misty suddenly walked over and pointed at a floor plan layout of the whole power plant. It looks like the control room is over in this direction. Her finger traced a straight line all the way to a red spot on the map that was shown to be the control room. Well, I guess we'll just follow that then, Brock suggested as he readjusted the pack on his shoulders. The four of them then set off down the dark hallway with Brock's flashlight leading the way. Though, after only following the long, dark hall for a short time, Misty, whom was in the back, felt as though something were moving around behind her. Looking over her shoulder quickly and seeing nothing, she shook her head and kept following after her friends. At least until she once more got the same feeling a second time. Misty then spun around fully and caught just the barest glimpse of something disappearing back up into the shadows near the ceiling. Feeling her skin crawl with terror, the orange-haired girl took off running out in front of her friends and then turned around and pointed as soon as she was in front of Ash. There's something back there. Her arm was shaky and her eyes were alight with the concern and fear she felt. I saw it move right there. The other three plus Pikachu and V, who were now on the ground, turned around to see what she was pointing at. Misty. Giselle began gently, trying not to say anything insensitive. There isn't anything there. Ash blinked and then looked back at the older girl. Are you sure there was really something there, Misty? I'm not trying to pick on you or anything, but sometimes the mind plays tricks in dark places like this. She rapidly shook her head. No. I know what I saw and it was right back there. Why don't we just keep going and see if it shows up again then? Brock offered placatingly, which received a nod from Misty as they began going about their way. Once more in the back, though this time with Ash in front of her where he insisted to be to help give her comfort, Misty was visibly on edge. Eyes shifting back and forth and hands held together at her chest, she tried to convince herself that it was only her mind playing tricks on her. She was just beginning to calm down too when, right behind her, almost at the back of her head, she felt more than heard something levitate down by her neck. The hair on her nape seemed to stand on end from the weak charge the figure seemed to give off and, most unnervingly, she heard a metallic sounding, might, speak up from the same stalker. As soon as she heard this, Misty practically jumped out of her skin and screamed as she ran around in front of Ash and hid herself behind the younger trainer. Brock and Giselle, as well as Ash, jumped in a start at hearing Misty scream and they, as well as Pikachu and V, went on automatic alert. Misty, what is it? Ash demanded. Why the heck did you scream like that? I just saw it again. I know I did. She yelled frantically. I saw it right behind me. Yet again, the three of them just looked at Misty for a time before he put his hands on his hips and sighed. Look, Misty, maybe this whole creepy dark power outage thing is really beginning to get to you. It's okay if it is too, I'm not, however Misty cut him off with. No. I know what I saw. He sighed again. I'm not saying you didn't. All I'm saying is that sometimes your mind can play tricks on you and you never realize it at the time. He continued to go on, but at that time, Brock and Giselle finally saw what Misty was talking about as a levitating shape lowered itself down from the ceiling behind Ash. And I mean really guys, if we keep getting spooked at every little thing then how are we? He trailed off upon seeing the jointly scared expressions on all three of his friends' faces. Which lead him to raise an eyebrow as he held his hands out. What? Seeing the thing now hovering right behind his head, Giselle pointed a shaky finger at him while she and the other two huddled together closely. Hey Ash, turn around, look behind you. Confused beyond complacent satisfaction, he did so, and as soon as he did, Ash found himself face to face with a big, glowing eye. And the reaction was instantaneous. Wah! The young man yelled as he jumped back and fell down onto his backside while pointing a shaky finger up in the air. What the heck is that? All four petrified friends stood quivering in the eerie dark of the hallway. Each of them staring fearfully at the unknown entity hovering before them in the shadows while Pikachu and V huddled near Ash's legs. Finally, Brock had the sense to lift his flashlight upward, and as soon as he did, the answer to their mystery stalker was revealed. As the light bathed the creature and illuminated its identity, all of them stared in open-mouthed disbelief at what was very clearly a lone Magnemite hovering before them. Magnemite. It mechanically vocalized while they continued to stare. It's just. Misty began. A Magnemite. Giselle finished. Feeling relieved, all of them relaxed as Ash stood up and brushed himself off. Phew. Glad that's over.